For me, a successful day of street photography has nothing to do with what camera brand I'm shooting or how expensive my lens is. It's really all about how my gear makes me feel. This 25mm f2 lens from TTArtisan is what brought back that feeling to my Sony. And let me tell you, it was magical. So let's talk about this lens because it really is magical. But before we do, I have to mention that TTArtisan did send this lens out to me for free. I very much appreciate that, and of course all the things that I'm gonna say in this video are my own thoughts. They did not get to see this video before it was posted. Let's talk about my favorite thing first, which is the feel. The feel of a lens is really important in my opinion because when you're out on the streets, you want to feel confident with your gear. And this lens just feels like a smaller version of my more expensive lenses. It's actually really light. Like really light, and you don't really feel it on the camera. But with that said, it's made of completely metal. Moving on to the focus ring, which is arguably the most important part of this lens because at the end of the day, this is a manual focus lens. And if that focus ring isn't amazing, then why even consider a lens like this? But I will tell you guys, this focus ring is buttery smooth. I mean butter. You know when you put butter on a pan that's hot and it just starts to like slide? That's exactly how this focus ring is. It is so good. It instills confidence, it's smooth, and it's actually fast. So when you turn it, you can get to your focus point pretty quickly. I have the exact same thing to say about the aperture ring too. It's really good. It's smooth. And it is clicked, but the clicks are like it's like a soft thud, you know? It's not like these hard clicks. The fact that TTArtisan could nail the feel of this lens for $55 blows my mind and makes it an amazing value. Like imagine going out with this thing and every time you touch it, because you're manually focusing, it gives you confidence. I mean, think about how that's going to help your photography. And not only that, but this lens really makes the camera small, compact, perfect for travel. It makes it very under the radar for street photography. And I actually had a couple of people stop me in Chinatown and they said, wow, that's a nice camera. Once the feel is right, everything else will kind of fall into place. But performance is one thing that also needs to be looked at. For $55, the sharpness is shockingly good. You'll notice that everybody says this thing is really, really sharp. If you nail focus, that is. If you don't, it's going to be soft. But when you get the focus, it is exceedingly sharp for the price point. Here's a portrait I took here at f2 and look how sharp this is. Like, it's amazing. Yeah, of course the light is good, but the sharpness for a $55 manual focus lens is beyond what it should be. Honestly, it's a bargain. So of course, when it comes to sharpness, there's absolutely nothing to be concerned about with this lens. And of course, as you go to f4, f5.6, it only gets better. Another aspect I would consider is how heavy is the vignetting. If it's really heavy, it might be a deal breaker. It's a little heavy on this lens. I'll show you in that portrait. You know, you can see it, but it adds a nice touch to the photos. But if you don't like it, it's easily correctable. And to be quite honest, it's not that far off from my Sigma 35mm f2, which is a $700 lens. So of course, let's talk about the not so good things about this lens. My least favorite thing about this lens is how short it is. And I know that sounds funny because I always talk about compact lenses and light setups on this channel. But the issue I found was when I was out shooting in Chinatown, I was range focusing. And when I was doing that, I found a lot of my shots to be out of focus. And I would look down at my focus ring and it was out of place. And I noticed that my finger is really close to the focus ring. Now, if you're just going to adjust the focus every shot yourself, this is not an issue. But for me personally, when I'm shooting with a manual lens, I want to take advantage of the range focusing because it's so good, especially if you know how to do it. Yet, if the camera and the design of the lens kind of hinder my ability to use range focus, that is kind of a con for me. But again, if you're going to be using the lens manually and adjust focus every single time by yourself, it's not going to be a big deal. It could also be the camera. The grip on the A7C is big. It's not like the A7R5, but it's hefty. If you're going to put this like on your Fuji, they have smaller grips and you might not actually have that problem. Again, if you don't range focus, then this doesn't really apply. The second thing I'm not a huge fan of is the lens cap. It's screw in. It's nice because it's never going to fall off, but if you need to take it off like really quickly, it can take a little bit of time. But when it comes down to it, yeah, I would prefer a metal cap over a plastic one. But don't ask me how many times I dropped the cap because I was unscrewing it and it just slipped out of my hand. The last thing I want to mention, which is actually not a bad thing, is just the nature of the lens, and it was sent to a guy who has a full frame camera, but it is an APS-C lens. And when I was using it, all of those photos you saw from Chinatown were 14 megapixel, not the 33 megapixel. They are surprisingly good for 14 megapixel. I was impressed and they look good in the video. But at the end of the day, like, I don't want to reduce my camera to a 14 megapixels. Obviously, for the sake of this video, that wasn't an issue and the photos still look great, but at the end of the day, I want my 33 megapixels. There's no reason for me to have 14. It might be a slightly different story if I had like a Sony A7R5, which is like a 60 megapixel. So, if I shot this in APS-C, it might be like 30 or 28. I haven't done the math on that, but that to me makes a little more sense. But going from like 33 to 14, it's not a compromise that I want to make. I forgot to mention, there's one more thing. It's not a big deal to me, but for some people it might be. There's no EXIF data, so like when you shoot, you're not getting any information from the lens sent to the camera, and the camera doesn't recognize the lens. So if you like to look back at your photos and see what aperture you shot it in, you'll have no idea because there's no sort of connection points to relay that information to your camera. Now you're probably wondering, can I recommend this lens to you? And that depends on a few factors. Do you shoot APS-C? Are you a Fuji guy? Do you have an A6700, A6600? Then I would say yes, 100%. This is a lens that you should pick up. And the main reason I say that is because you're going to get full use of all your megapixels. For Sony users, I will say though that you may risk throwing off the focus if you decide to range focus, if that's your thing. That's just something to keep in mind though. Again, it's really hard to say don't buy it because it's $55. But again, I missed a lot of shots because of that. For my full frame guys, I would say it's 50-50. It depends on what you're going to do. Like for example, if you have a camera like mine with 33 megapixels or even one with 24, and you're just gonna post to like social media and throw some photos up on your YouTube video, it's not a big deal to have a 12 or 14 megapixel photo. But if you have a higher megapixel camera like one of the R's where it's like 40 or 60, then the reduction's not so bad. You'll be at like 24, maybe 30 megapixels, which is still really good for today's standards. All in all, I gotta say, it's quite unbelievable what they can do with a lens like this for the price point. It's almost like a no-brainer. It's not a huge risk and the results are really good. I'm gonna leave a couple links down below in case you want to buy this lens. If you're still unsure about it, I have another video coming out after this where I take it out in the streets with, you know, in a POV style video. So if you just want to watch one more video to make your decision, that's going to be coming soon. Again, I want to say thanks to TTArtisan for sending out this lens, and of course I want to say thanks to you for watching this video. I really want to see you again, so you should hit subscribe so we can meet in the next video. Of course, if you like this video, got something out of it, make sure to hit the like button. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Get out there and take some photos, and we'll see each other in the next video.